Today we're going to make one more use of our partial in that we're currently using the partial on the show page for a horse, as well as on the show page for a breed to show all of the horses that belong to that breed. I'd now like to add the ability to do a little bit of search, and just like a very simple search to search for horses by partial name and then sort of display the collection of horses that match that. And for that we need a form, and we're going to need a controller action to take the data from that form, pass it over to ActiveRecord, and actually make the query. And so let's look at where we want to put that action. We could make a separate controller, like a search controller, and often that is sort of the way we might go about it. I think I'm going to perhaps piggyback onto the horses controller and add it in here. Yeah, let's see if that proves to be a good idea or not. I'll do a quick little experiment. So I'm going to add a search results here. And what that means is that I'm also going to need a search results view in the horses folder right here. So I'm going to go make that file, search results.html.erb. Search results, go here. So that's just temporary text that I'm just putting into that view because I want to see if I can expose this controller action and this view by way of a route. I'm going to have this route respond to, or I'm going to have this action respond to a GET request. And so what I would like is maybe something like horses/search results, something along those lines. And with the option of like passing along a parameter, what we're searching for, and that's going to come from our form. So the form's going to post with a GET, and it'll go here. The reason I'm not using an actual post from the form is just because sort of convention around search results on the internet is that search results should be shareable, right? You'd like to be able to have a link that you could like send to someone else or maybe even save for yourself. If you submit with a post, you can't bookmark that. If you submit with a GET request and the search result query is in the URL, you can bookmark that. So it's just sort of sticking with internet conventions. I've got to go into the routing file here, and here's the part that I always forget. So I want to add, see, we're already building up everything with resources here, and we're asking just for a show route. I should be able to request another collection route. I'm going off of memory here, so this could be completely wrong. I GET request to search results goes to, no, yeah, let's see if there's, let's see. If I go to Rails info, I'm going to get to see the route there, and that looks like what I want. A GET request to /horses/search results is going to call the horses search results controller action. So I should be able just to try that. Horses search results, and search results go here. So I didn't really explain what I was doing here. When you add a block, a do/end block to resources, you can go beyond the 7 RESTful routes, right? So we've already restricted our 7 RESTful routes down to 1, but now we want to add more. And there's 2 types of routes you can add to a resource: collection routes or member routes. Collection routes have to do with the entire collection. So like the index page is a collection route, and a member route has to do with one member in the collection, and it always has the ID along with it. And so if I defined like a new member here, that route would have like the ID tag, or sorry, the ID placeholder in the URL as part of its definition. So I'm not dealing with a particular member here. That's why I define this as a collection route that I'm adding to the horses resources. Okay, that's good. That worked. I remembered. The brain is working. Let's commit this. Added a search results collection route to horses controller.
Does that all work on resources, or can you do that on?
I mean, I could have also just built this route up completely manually. I could have said like a get request to, and then just sort of define the path and where it goes to. But the idea of like collection and member routes is paired with resources. Then the next question is like, where do I want the form to go, the search form? And I'm gonna just default to the idea that I want this to be present on all pages. And so I'm going to put that in my application layout. So I don't need another view in which to put the form. I'm not going to send my users off to a special search page just to do searching. I'm going to have a form that's present on all pages. So I'm going to go to the application here, and I will, let's say I put it in the this top section. Now our initial gut feel when we're in an HTML document is just to start, typing HTML. But sometimes in Rails that's not the right thing to do. Sometimes we use helpers to build HTML for us, like the link to helper. And so we have similar helpers for building forms. And those are it's even more important to use those helpers, and we'll see why in a moment. So here's Action View Form Helpers on the guides. So I click through to the Action View Form Helpers guide. And lo and behold, the very first example is a generic search form. And so I can just copy and paste that code into mine and make a few modifications. I want you to go 2 more times over. Oh no, 1 more time over. The URL is going to be, I gotta go back here and see the name of that route that I just created. Rails info has a name of search results horses path, a long name, but that's where I want that to be. The method is a get. This is going to generate for me a label tag that says search for. That label tag is going to be paired with a text field tag with a parameter or a name of Q. I don't really like Q so much. Maybe it's Q for query, so let's just write it out. That's what the user is doing. They're querying by way of our search. And then a submit tag that has the word search in it. And so if I go back to my application, I see a little form, not styled yet in the Bulma styling way. Maybe let's see if we can quickly add some styles to that. What do you want me to do for styling? Oh, it's more than I want to do right now. That's it seems like a lot of work. I'm gonna leave the styling for now. Let's just stick to the form. If I look at the view source here, let's see what the generated output is. The other reason I was sort of hesitant there is that the default output is not going to match the structure of what Bulma is going to want to style. So here, is the form that's being generated. You can see it's got an action that's going to the path that I asked it to go to. Method is a GET request, and it's got, there's my label, there's my input, etc., etc. So I should be able to submit this content and have the content appear in the params hash, same place where we go to get IDs, and I should be able to query params at position query to get that data. And so that data is going to be sent by way of a GET request here, and then I should be able to get the query by going to the params at position query. And I'm just saving it to an instance variable so that I can display that in the view as well. So something like your search for query returned this many results. And so I could say something like that. Your search for query returned n results, where we'll fill in the blank for n in a moment. That looks good. Let's see if it works. Testing. And it doesn't, and that's because things with Rails have changed a little bit. I need to say remote false. Let me just see. Often Rails is a bit of a moving target, like all things on the web. Local true. Let me see if that is a thing that I need. There. The reason I had to put that local true in there is that by default, Rails tries to do everything with Ajax. So what it was doing is it was sending that data back to my server with JavaScript, but that wasn't then going to refresh my page because it wasn't going to cause an actual page reload. And so in some cases that might be helpful, right? You could then sort of repopulate the page with JavaScript, but we're not there yet in the course. So I'm just set local to true so that the form wasn't hijacked by JavaScript and it was just sent through like an ordinary form. So you can see that was solved with this extra parameter right here, local true. When that got submitted, you can see up here, there's the query right here, query equals testing. And if it was like a multi-word query, multiple words are here. Multiple words are here, appears up there. They're separated by, instead of spaces, by pluses, which is the convention for URLs because a space isn't a valid character in URLs. So my data is getting through. That's good. And now I need to use that data in a query to actually query the horses table. And so I can say like horse dot where. And I'll initially do a bit of a naive query, and then I'll improve my query. I guess I need to save this to horses. And then I'll say like where name is query. This is naive in that it's going to do a full word match, right? So I'm only, if I search for the word Kyle, it'll only return horses with that exact name, not a partial match. And so now within my search results, I could say something like, instead of n, I could use my, let's do this and this. Pluralize and And the two things that I want to pluralize are horses.size and the word results. So if it returns one result, or if it returns multiple results, it'll properly pluralize based on the size of the returned data. And then, just like I did on other pages, I can use my partial to render out these horses. And so I need a div with a class of columns into which I do my rendering. And I'm going to just cheat and go to the breeds show page and pull in this information from there. So I'll pull those 3 lines from the breeds show page and put them here. And then I noticed on that breeds show page, I also need the is multi-line. The collection now is at horses. So that will go and it will render a partial. Which partial? Well, it's going to go into the folder that I'm in, so I don't need to path it anymore. So I'm already in that folder. It'll render that once for every horse in the collection, and it'll add links so that people can follow from the search results into an individual horse's page. I'm going to go get a name of a horse that actually exists. Olaf. Olaf the horse. Okay. Olaf. Your search for Olaf returned 1 result. Great. Makes me happy. That worked, but again, a bit of a naive search, right? You probably want the ability to search for sort of partial matches. Given the data I'm working with here, it's not super, it's like single word things. So like even partial matches doesn't match the data that I'm working with necessarily, but we could search for things like single letters and see like all the horses that contain the letter A or the letter E or something like that. So that's how we'll expand our search, but I'll save what I've done so far here. Implemented naive horse search for a horse. So to make this less naive, I don't just want a one-to-one match between the name and the query. I have to hop down to a little bit of SQL here because I want what SQL uses when we want to do a partial match, which is like a like query. And so I want to find a horse where the name is like something. And I put the question mark in there because I'm dealing with user data. And if I was to take just straight up user data and echo it or concatenate it into a string, I'd be opening up myself to SQL injections. So ActiveRecord has protections in place for SQL injections in most instances, but once you start like building snippets of SQL by building strings based on user input and then like filtering those off down into ActiveRecord, that's like danger territory, right? That's pure SQL injection ready to go. So let's not do that, and let's compose a string that will then get put into that place. This is similar to what we did when we worked with like PDO in WebDev 2, and we would leave placeholders in our queries and we would bind those parameters. And so this question mark, I can have as many question marks as I want in the first parameter here, and then the following parameters are what should be put into each of those question marks. I only have 1, so in here it's the query that I want, but it's more than just the query that I want. What are the wildcards in SQL? Who remembers? You got it. And I want them on either side. So build a string with the query in between 2 % signs saying like wildcard on the right and wildcard on the left, and then drop that in or have ActiveRecord drop that in as that parameter. that should now allow me to do a search which will result in partial matches with my query. And so A, 40 results, all the different horses that have an A in their name. I can't really see if there's any similarities that maybe go beyond that. Like ER, do you have an ER in your name? There you are, you're Peter Pan, or you're a Traveler, or you're a Challenger, or Pepper, or Tiger, or Trigger. So it looks like things are working. I'm making use of the partial that I had built up last class. The form, still not looking that great because I'm not going to style it, but at least it's functionally doing what we want. The form is sending a GET request, which is putting the query into a GET parameter in the URL. I'm able to tease that back out of the URL by way of the params hash, where all posted and GET parameters end up. And then I can put that into a wildcard, depending on, in my case, I wanted wildcards on either side of my query, and then use that in a parameterized like query with a where clause. And if we looked at the server, we'd see the actual SQL that would have been generated, and that is right here. Select horses.star from horses where name like, and then in quotes, %a% or % whatever I've queried %. And that is a very quick implementation of a simple search. In the project, you can take it a step further and search based on some category. And so what that would look like in the terms of this project is maybe you would want to limit your search to a particular breed. And so for that, we would add like a drop-down selector in this form to allow you to first either pick all breeds or one of the breeds in the system, and then that would also be submitted to your action. And you could make a more complicated where clause. You could do an include to bring in the breeds table, and then you could chain on another where clause to ensure that the breed that the user had selected in their query is going to match the breeds that you're querying when performing your ActiveRecord query. So that I'll leave up to you to figure out if you want to do that aspect of the sort of the more advanced querying. I will give you a hint that if you go to the Rails overview notes, it does explain how to sort of work with the form helpers to have the form helpers automatically make the drop-down list for you. So like a drop-down list in a form is like a select tag with a number of option tags. Well, you can have Rails build that for you using a combination of the select tag helper and the options for select helper. You just need to give options for select an array. And in this case, that would just be an array of all of the breeds that we have in the system. We'd have to add one other element to that array, which should be just like the word all, right? Because you would also want users to be able to search across all. And then here in the search results, you would maybe have an if-else statement, like if it's all, then just do this query. If it's something other than all, then do a more complex query that takes the breed into consideration. And so I will submit that, improved my search to include a wild card match for the horse's name over partial horse names. And I think all queries are default that default to being case insensitive. And so Olaf, yeah. And so That, I believe, is a function of the database that we're using. I believe if we were using Postgres, it might be a case-sensitive query, and then we would have to go to change our like to an I-like, and then I-like is the case-insensitive version of querying in Postgres. But in SQLite, the like query is just case-insensitive by default. Any questions or comments on what I have done today to implement a search? If we recall, sort of the route I took was I started with routes. I added a new route to my horses resource. I made an action for it and an associated view. I decided to put my form in a place where it would appear on every page, and I used the form with helper along with a few of the tag helpers to build up my form. And the one thing that I had to do that went beyond what was in the Rails guides was to set local to true here so that we didn't have the form being submitted sort of behind the scenes with JavaScript. And you could see that if you leave this off. Let me go back over here. Let's go back to the home page. If I go to the network tab, we should be able to see the Ajax request sort of happening in the back end. So you can see there's the Ajax request and the response, but like that's not what we want in this case. We didn't want things to go on behind the scenes because then we would have had to handle them differently from behind the scenes. And there's different ways that Rails can use JavaScript to inject new data back into the page, but we're not going to go there today. So I will put this back to where it was. So any questions about any of those steps or anything that I've covered today? Yep. It would be something you do yourself, and so just like string manipulation techniques. Yeah. Yeah. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to, whatever you break up, you're going to have to filter off to ActiveRecord anyways and build up some kind of query there. I see. You could definitely break that up, and there are a few search gems out there that like can make sort of more advanced searching easier. Let's see if I can find a few of them. Which one of these is the one that I want? Do we have search? It's been a while since I've used any of these. I found the last time that I tried to use a search gem in Rails that it was actually more difficult just learning it than building it myself.
And let's say you wanted to filter down your search as your keywords are there, say higher level people search or whatever. So would it be good practice to build upon your search parameters sequentially in your controller, or would you just parse it all out first and then?
You could do it either way.
Is ActiveRecord smart enough to?
ActiveRecord is smart enough, so you could like after you've composed something like this, in an if-else statement, you could then like go and add more. Yeah. That's right. That's right. So yeah, you could build that up piecewise. So you could do this initial where, and then you could have your if-else of whether this is a category-based search or not, and you could add to the ActiveRecord query by chaining on more things.
So in that way, you're basically chaining ands.
Yeah, you're chaining ands, and if you need to chain ors, those are done a little differently. We just got ors in like one of the last 5x releases, and there's like a dot or that you pass a whole separate ActiveRecord relation to. So you can do both ands and ors now. Yeah.
It was an interesting time.
It was probably a lot of manual work.
It was quite a bit of work.
Yeah. So there'll still be some manual work associated with that kind of search in Rails, but maybe not as much.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to be manipulating these very much.
There you go. Any other questions or comments on adding a simple search like this to a Rails application?
Can you go back to where the form was submitted and you have a local food?
Yes.
So are you saying that it's possible to actually do like an Ajax request and have Rails handle it without any kind of a reactive?
Yeah, so Rails has a whole JavaScript sort of reactive system built into it already. Part of that is what's called turbolinks, and another part of that is you can actually just create JavaScript views. And what they can do is they can target particular portions of your page and render partials into those portions of your page. And so you could have this do you could go do a search here, and that would be go on the back end, and then JavaScript could come in, find a particular div in the page, and inject the partial over and over and over for each of the search results. I don't teach that style of JavaScript anymore in this course, but I do have a video on it, and so I'll send that out in Learn, and you could sort of see how that's done, because it's actually really, really cool. And for myself, sometimes when I need just a little bit of reactivity in my app, I'm not going to bother going to something like Vue, and I'll just use Rails's sort of built-in reactivity like that. Any other questions before we're done? Or before we move to marking? Okay, I will stop the video then.